Welcome to So That Reminds Me, Reminder Publishing's bi-weekly podcast discussing Western Mass news. I'm Payton North.
And I'm Dennis Hackett.
And we'll be your hosts for today's episode. So today's episode is going to be different than some of our previous episodes. Today we are hosting another deep dive, this time discussing the case of Brian Fanion. We're about to get some true crime vibes up in here.
Yeah, so we teased this in our last episode that we were going to be doing this special episode. On May 5th, CBS released their latest episode of 48 Hours featuring Westfield resident and former Westfield Police Detective Brian Fanion. We at the Reminder are very familiar with the Brian Fanion case, as one of our reporters sat in court for about a month during the trial, covering it for our daily newspaper, the Westfield News, as well as our original Penny Saver. What we're going to do today is first we're going to share the background and details of what happened with the Brian Fanion case, then we're going to discuss the CBS special and our take on the special.
So naturally, the CBS special could not include all the details in an hour of what happened, which is where we come in. For our listeners who may not have watched the special yet, if you're looking to do so, I'd suggest pausing us now and coming back after you've watched. The episode, it's on Paramount Plus, and I think it was on a couple other streaming services. It's called Postmortem, The Detective's Wife. So first, let me start with the case and what happened, just the basics. It's May 8th, 2018. Brian Fanion left work and went home to have lunch with his 51-year-old wife, Amy. Amy was making them peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch. According to Brian, an argument continued from the night before about his upcoming retirement and what that would look like, as well as Amy RSVPing the two of them to an event that he didn't want to attend. According to Brian, he put his Westfield Police duty-issued gun on the hutch in their kitchen area, and he went to another room. As they're arguing again, according to Brian's testimony, Amy came up to him with his gun in her hand and said something along the lines of, "You obviously don't want me here anymore," and shot herself in the head. Brian called 911, reporting that his wife had shot herself, and at 1 p.m., Mass State Police detectives arrived at the Fanion farmhouse, seeing Amy Fanion laying dead in the dining room. From there, the Mass State Police was determined to be the sole investigators of the death to avoid a conflict of interest. Fanion was charged with first-degree murder of Amy Fanion in November of 2019. Now, this is all top of mind because Brian didn't go to trial until February 21st, 2023, just over a year ago. So this is the part where if you haven't watched the special yet, it'd be a little bit helpful for you to do so because then you'd understand some of the differences between the special and the things that we were able to shed some light on from the trial from Cliff Clark, one of our reporters attending the whole trial. So Dennis and I are going to go through some interesting points that we found watching this CBS special. But basically, the special saw a couple of Mass State Police detectives who came on, and they spoke about the case. They went ahead and they were on scene. They spoke about where the blood smattering was. They spoke about where the gun bullet discharged. They spoke about the location of the weapon and how all of this worked out. The CBS special also spoke with some local people. They spoke with Stephanie Berry of The Republican and her reporting. And I feel like there was someone else mixed in there that I'm not remembering off the top of my head.
Yeah, they spoke to the assistant district attorney whose name is escaping me right now. I want to say...
Is it Mary? Is that Mary?
I think it was Mary Sandstrom.
Yeah. Yep. So they went around Westfield. They showed the home. They showed the layout of their home, the Fanion home. And it definitely shed a lot of light on the layout and just the setup of things. But Dennis and I are just going to jump right into some of the interesting points that we found, some things that we felt that could have gone into further detail, obviously taking into account the fact that this is a, 45-minute hour episode, so they can only do so much.
I think it was 40 minutes or so.
But there was a lot that was left out, and it really did... It didn't feel to me that the special was trying to skew anything either way.
Yeah.
I feel like you could walk away from watching it thinking, I don't know, maybe she did it, but maybe he did it. I don't know. I don't know how I feel.
Yeah.
I know how I feel knowing what I know from everything that I read about the trial and Cliff's, discussion in the office. But watching that, they really did leave it up to the viewer to, hey, what do you think? And I don't think based on the special you could really come to a conclusion.
No. And I'm going to go on a limb here and say that even with all the reporting we have, I think it's still really hard to come to a conclusion either way because there's a lot of evidence and conflicting evidence on both sides. So it's...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, there just has to be that tiny ounce of doubt. And that tiny ounce of doubt is how you unfortunately have to make your decision, whether it's correct or not.
Obviously, it was more than enough because to make the decision, it had to be a unanimous decision from the jury, and they unanimously agreed that he was guilty.
Yep, absolutely. So let's start going through some things. Dennis made a great list here, and I'm sure I'm going to have some things pop into my head as we're going along, but we'll go through some notes in this special and just talk about them. Yeah.
One thing from the special that stood out to me was kind of the contradictions made by Anna Hansen, Amy's sister, during her testimony. They mentioned this. Obviously, they didn't have a lot of time to go into details, but they, in the special, had mentioned that her testimony was a little contradictory, and she was also the lone member of either Brian's family or Amy's family to testify against Brian.
That is I still can't believe that not one single member, other than Anna, not one single member of the family, his or hers, thought that he did it. And something we haven't talked about yet, but we probably will, and I'll let you get back to your point, was that Amy's brother was playing disc golf in the premises of their property, the Fanion property, when she allegedly committed suicide. Allegedly, Brian killed her. So the brother, Eric, heard Brian scream for help. Eric ran in, and Eric was on scene seconds after the death. So I agree. It's just crazy that I can't believe that Anna's the only one.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Continue.
And we'll get more into it, but some of their family did have some other testimony that I thought was kind of revealing that wasn't necessarily shown during the special as well. But yeah. But to get started with what Anna had said, she had testified that Amy had been diagnosed with IBS in 2014, and she claimed that it was as a result of Brian beginning to... Peyton's giving a shaking her head look right now, but we're going to get into some of these contradictions. But basically, she was claiming that Brian was poisoning her, and that's why she was starting to have IBS. However, Brian's attorney pointed out that Amy had been diagnosed with IBS in 2006. And at the same time, Anna had also testified that that was the only health problem that Amy had. But she was also diagnosed with anxiety and prescribed lorazepam, which is an anti-anxiety medication.
The IBS thing, I mean, your body is irritated by food generally, so many foods. I don't think we got any details as to what she thought she was her sister was being poisoned with, how. I don't remember seeing any details on that. But, there are so many people in this world that have IBS. Mm-hmm. It feels like 9 times out of 10 people have IBS. So it would be very bizarre for her to all of a sudden be being poisoned and just getting IBS.
And
from
the
timeline
poison, doesn't match up at all when she was diagnosed with it 8 years prior to...
Right. And I don't know. So that was a strange one.
Yeah. But to go off of the poisoning, she had claimed that she had spoken with Brian 2 weeks after Amy's death, and that he had said to her that he was Googling ways to make a murder look like a suicide. But as...
He had said that in the context of I'm nervous, right? Didn't he say something along the lines of
I believe so.
I had been looking into this, just curiosity, basically, is what he was chalking it up to. And he was confiding in that moment to her. Yeah.
But then also, I think the attorney later pointed out that wasn't picked up on any of the devices that they had seized from him to search. There were some other...
there were other unfortunate
There were definitely
searches.
other searches on there that were whoa. But they did not find the making a murder look like a suicide. So continuing on, another kind of inconsistency was that she couldn't attest to Amy's job. Anna had believed that she was working at an accounting firm, but the Brian's attorney had said that she only was working about 4 hours a week at a job where she was getting paid under the table.
So Anna didn't even have any understanding of what Amy was doing for work, which is a little bizarre.
Yeah. And then she also, in that testimony, said that something felt off about Brian dating back to 2017. But the attorney pointed out that there was an instance where Amy and Brian's son was in the hospital after a serious car crash. And at the same time, Anna had called and asked them for a ride. Obviously, you're going to stick with your kid that's in the hospital instead of, picking up your sister and giving her a ride home. But and he attributed that to being kind of giving them giving her the cold shoulder after that. And that was what he had attributed to the off feeling that she had felt. And then another interesting contradiction, she also had signed a letter of support for the family, and just like everybody else had, but she was the only one that said that she had felt pressured to do so.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, all of the things that she's saying are just a little bizarre. They're all a little off, which is unfortunate for potentially Amy's sake, but it's just strange. And I wonder what Brian pressured her to sign this letter.
I don't know if it was Brian or
the lawyer.
I want to say that in the article that I was reading from Cliff, it was the family, and she didn't want to be the only member of the family. You're right.
It was the family. Yeah, the family pressured
sign it.
Is what she said. Yeah. Yeah, and something that you have noted here up next, and then we'll get into a brief little commercial break, but I wanted to mention this first. There was no anxiety medication mentioned in the CBS special.
Yeah.
They basically said something along the lines of she had no history going on of
that was very bizarre, because that felt like a pretty big omission when anxiety is obviously tied to lots of other mental health issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And so she was on some level of anxiety medication. And Brian had said, she didn't have any issues. She didn't have any issues in his first discussion, in his first statement with the detectives. But then later, these things start coming out. Well, she did have anxiety and all of these other things going on. So let's take a brief break. We'll have a couple of messages, and then we'll get back into it.
Since the founding of Reminder Publishing over 60 years ago, The Reminder has brought local businesses together with their customers through our advertising and coverage. Over the past 4 years, The Reminder has been adding to its reporting and expanding our readership, while other newspapers in the region, state, and country have scaled back or closed. We want local community journalism to thrive and grow, and are asking our readers and listeners to support and participate. The Reminder Press Club's mission is to ensure that local journalism is sustainable and leading healthy community discussions. The Reminder Press Club is a way for you to support the crucial work of professional reporters covering the vital stories in our community. Learn more about the Reminder Press Club or join at reminderpressclub.com.
Every month, Reminder Publishing's Go Local magazine features the best Western Mass and Northern Connecticut businesses, with articles on new storefronts, coffee shops, restaurants, and more. Go Local magazine is your resource to find the best businesses to frequent in the area. Go Local also features original recipes, how-to pages on festive crafts, a listing of places to go, and experiences to enjoy over the course of the month, and so much more. Pick up Go Local magazine at hundreds of businesses, banks, gas stations, and restaurants all over Western Mass and Northern Connecticut. Or check out Go Local magazine at thereminder.com.
And we're back. One thing that I noticed that they had, that not just necessarily from the special, but from going through the articles as well, was that Brian had left his gun out when he went to go use the bathroom when Amy either shot herself, or when he claimed that Amy had shot herself in taking the gun. And I thought that was kind of interesting. For those who don't know, my dad is a police officer, and when he comes home, his gun is gone. And it's been that way for, I don't know, however long. Obviously, I understand this is a different situation where he's coming home for lunch and he's obviously going to go back to work. But I thought it was interesting that they were having this what he called and was described as a heated argument. He left his gun out on the hutch instead of taking it with him. and then going to the bathroom and then coming back and supposedly finding his wife holding the gun to her head.
Yeah, so we talked about this in the office a little bit yesterday, and I don't think any firearm should be just laying out, but I also don't think it's that bizarre. Like, he came home from work, he was going back to work, he was just there for lunch, he's going to take off his belt so he can go to the bathroom, sit in his chair, get comfortable, have his lunch, and then go home, put his belt back on. I don't think that's crazy. I don't know, I'm not a cop, but if it was me, I can't imagine that I would go through the effort of, I'm going to take my belt off, I'm going to put my gun in my safe for the next half hour, and then I'm going to go take it out of the safe, and then I'm going to put it back in my belt. Maybe I'm leaving it in my cruiser. I don't know if you do that. Do you leave your gun in your cruiser? Probably not.
If it's locked.
If it's in a safe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know.
But I don't find that bizarre. I also grew up in a family who has guns, and like, I'm not uncomfortable around them. So that doesn't seem weird to me. But I do think it would be weird if if she had a history of mental illness and like this could be something that we're nervous about, then yeah, it is weird that you would leave it out. But if you're just having a conversation with your partner and it's an argument, I don't think you ever expect someone to just pick up the gun and do that. So I didn't find that overly weird. And to support that, there was a article that Cliff wrote where he spoke with, she was at court. She testified at court. One of Amy's friends from church, who she saw on a weekly basis. They went to church, they went to the movies, they did a bunch of stuff together. She testified. She went over to Amy and Brian's house for lunch, and she saw a handgun on the dining room table. And her direct quote was, "I abhor guns. It startled me." And basically, Amy told her, it's okay. Brian left it there while he went upstairs to change. And when he came back down, he put the gun in the holster and, went back on. And that was that. And that just seems totally normal to me. Like, I've never worn a belt with a gun on it, but I can't imagine it would be comfortable to go to the bathroom and have it hanging off the side of your pants. So I don't know. That wasn't strange at all to me. But I can see why, again, if you're in a home with someone who has a history that you think has a history of mental illness, you wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But I imagine, Brian's been with his wife for how many years?
Yeah.
He's been a cop for how many years? He's probably done that a billion times and has thought of nothing of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I just thought it was interesting reading another article from Cliff after that current Westfield Mayor and Police Chief Michael McCabe said that Brian never took his gun off when he went to the bathroom at work. So I thought that was...
How does he know, though?
That's a great question. And why would you know that...
Brian maybe isn't leaving it out. You're not probably going to leave it out on the desk in your office. But if you're going into the bathroom, I don't know, he might walk in the stall. Yeah. He might take it off in the stall and put it on, like, the top of the toilet paper dispenser. Yeah. I don't know. Kind of a weird thing to claim unless he's in the stall with him. How do you know?
I thought that was... I just thought it was an interesting note because just growing up in my family, my dad's gun was out of sight, out of mind. Yeah, we didn't know where it was, locked away somewhere. Yeah.
Which is safe. That's how it should be. But I can totally see. We also talked about this is also... Brian's a veteran on the force. He's been doing this for a million years. It's not like he's fresh out of the academy with all this stuff. Of course, there's people like your dad who they don't need to be fresh out of the academy to follow protocol, but I think you get comfortable. You know what you're doing. You're in your own home. You don't think anything is going to happen. They didn't have any kids around. I don't blame that this is what he did. If this is all the circumstances that led to Amy's alleged suicide, I wouldn't have blamed him for doing that because that's that level of comfortability he had in his own home.
Yeah. I get that.
So switching gears a little bit.
Do you want to talk about his supposed lover next?
Oh, the lover. Yes, there was a lover. So, Corrine Hasty. She also went by another last name as well.
Yeah, so she had met Brian when she was still married, and at that time her last name was Knowles.
Yes. So you see her referred to as both in these articles a little bit. But yes, so Brian met Corrine at a church retreat.
Yes, they both served on a church retreat down to Mexico, and I want to say 2017.
Yes.
But
and
on that trip, they didn't really know each other all that well.
It started as a friendship. They had connected, and then it blossomed into more. And the CBS special does do a great job of showing their texts, showing the messages, because at first he basically says, oh, nothing happened between me and Corrine. And then you see, well, that's not true.
Yeah.
Like, at first, nothing happened, and then it divulged into a complete relationship. They were basically dating while Brian was married to his wife, and at the time, Corrine had a husband and then was divorcing. The texts were all shown, but basically there was a lot of the day before. Was it the day before?
I want to say it was the day before that it was like the night before. The two of them were they sent goodnight texts.
The night before Amy passed.
The night before Amy, yes, before Amy passed. But they sent each other goodnight text messages about how they were excited for their future together. And then lo and behold, his wife is dead the next day.
Yes. And Corrine, throughout, this is something that you pointed out, throughout the trial, she referred to Brian as the defendant.
Yes.
She never called him by his name.
Never by name.
Yeah. Which, again, I think I agree with something Chris Mazza said. He was like, she was probably just trained to do that.
Yeah.
She was probably just
It was definitely a coaching
trained
thing,
to refer to him as the defendant and really try and separate them. So Corrine and Brian dated until 2019. So she was with him throughout the passing of his wife and his being sentenced. He was sentenced in 2019.
Yeah.
Not sentenced. He was charged with the first-degree murder of Amy in November of 2019. So she was there through a lot of that experience, and they were dating. Is there anything else on Corrine that we should get into?
I mean, I think it's important to note that the entire time, or a lot of the time that she and Brian were talking, she was confiding in him a lot about divorcing from her husband at the time. And I think that's an important issue to bring up, not necessarily her divorce, but Brian's feelings of a divorce. So one of the things that is kind of hinted at and discussed throughout all the reporting and the special is that Brian was trying to find a way to keep all of his pension when he retired. And you could see it in like some of the searches that were discovered on his laptop, like how a pension would be split after a divorce, that type of thing.
Yeah, and he did in a text confide in her and say, if I divorce my wife, I'm going to lose half of everything.
Yeah.
Was basically what he said, and that was a big concern for him. So a lot of people have speculated that could have been a motivator for him in all of this.
And one of the things, too, is that they note in this special is that the Fanions are like a big family in Westfield, and it was almost like the way it was described, it was almost like taboo if a Fanion were to get a divorce or something like that.
Yeah, the way it was described in the special was that Brian had a level of status to a degree in the town. He's a detective. He's on the police force. He's been doing this for a million years. He knows everybody. Westfield is a city, but it's like a big town, a big, small town. It's everybody knows everybody. And Brian allegedly was nervous about how that could look for him to get a divorce, and for his family too, I'm sure, all the things that a normal divorce would go with, but with that level of people watching him. Yeah,
and obviously you can tell people were watching because not only was his family and friends like there during the trials and everything, but they had video from one of the testimonies, and I recognized City Councilor Ralph Figge in the audience at the trial. So it was definitely like there was a big kind of public eye on the family already, and then obviously a horrible situation kind of gets magnified as well.
Yeah, for sure. And ultimately, they also showed a clip from when he was sentenced, and they announced found guilty. You see the crowd, and everyone is like in shock.
Yeah.
Hands covering their mouth. You hear people cry out. It was a whole thing. Like, people were upset that he was sentenced for this, that he was found guilty. And I do find that so interesting because as an outsider, someone who is just looking in. I really don't know. I mean, it really could go either way, but I do have the little bit of doubt saying, personally, I think he could have done it.
Yeah,
I think he could have done it.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about, and I don't know if this is on the list, but something that we didn't talk about was the weapon and the gunshot residue.
Took the words. Oh, I was going in a different direction there.
Never mind. I didn't take the words out of your mouth.
We can start with the gunshot residue.
Yeah, so the gunshot residue was a big thing. That was one of the big things in favor of this potentially being a murder and not a suicide. The gunshot residue. So it was determined by the ballistics folks that the gun was held at an angle and a distance of 18 inches away from the head. You can't, as your own self, hold a gun 18 inches away from your head at the angle that it would have had to have happened.
Yeah. So that does kind of go to the point that I was going to make, because they claimed that, or not claimed, but with recreation and having women come in and model like a position, the furthest, because they mentioned that 18 inches was like the minimum that the shot would have been from. And the furthest that any woman of a similar height to Amy could do holding a gun sideways was about 15 and a half inches, I wanted to say. And
you would never, I mean, if you're trying to commit suicide, you're not holding the gun 18 inches away from your head.
And she would have had to hold the gun up 15 inches away with her thumb on the trigger.
Yes, and not to mention, Brian, in the video, the CBS special shows his interview, his first statement on what happened at the Russell State Police Barracks. He's sitting in the chair, and they say to him, like, how did she do it? And he holds his hand up, puts his fingers to his forehead, and motions like, she had the gun to her head, and that's how she shot herself. But this is suggesting otherwise. The one thing that the CBS special did really well was show how this could, basically, the residue is based off of not having hair in the way.
Yeah.
So there was no residue on her head, but they did not test her hair.
Yeah.
So this 18-inch thing could get thrown out if they had tested her hair for gunshot residue.
Yeah.
They did not.
Well, and to kind of circle back on that, I forget the name of the forensic scientist that they had interviewed, and he was doing the demonstrations on the special, but also testifying in court. He said that I might be misremembering, but I think he said that it was irresponsible almost to try to charge somebody based on gunshot residue, because there's just too many factors with that, and there's...
Especially they didn't test the hair.
Yeah.
So the thing with the hair was Amy apparently had thick hair. It was laying over the area where the bullet entered her brain. And she, in theory, the hair could have blocked the residue from reaching her head. And so they showed on the special the difference between a gun shooting through, they put like a wig over a piece of whatever. It wasn't a board,
I think it was a piece
something.
of metal or something.
Yeah, whatever they were shooting through. They put the hair over it, and they shot a gun through the hair. And then they did the same shot without the hair. And it showed, okay, you move the hair away, you don't see any gunshot residue underneath the hair, but without the hair, you see the residue at the same distance he did the 18 inches. So that was unfortunately kind of a wrench in that argument, because if you don't test the hair, they didn't know, they didn't have that knowledge, you can't really use that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can to put some doubt, but it's not necessarily factual.
Yeah, and then even going off of the residue, there's also the angle that the gun was apparently shot, where it passed through behind her right earlobe, or I want to say, and the angle was like it was from up almost.
Yeah, which again, that wouldn't be the angle that I think people would.
Yeah.
If you were doing this to yourself, I don't think that would be what you'd do, personally.
Yeah.
So the next thing I really want to talk about, and one of the reasons why I definitely have pause when it comes to how this case is played out, is when Amy was just either killed or she killed herself. Brian is there in the room. He's holding her hand as her brother walks into the dining room where she's laying on the ground dead. He has blood on his hands, her blood on his hands. Eric, the brother, moves the gun.
Yep.
He moves the gun.
And then that's like crimes.
Crime scene 101.
Yeah,
You don't do that.
You don't move evidence. I mean, obviously he's not a police officer, so he doesn't.
I'm not a police officer either, and I know not to do that.
But you can also see, like, his reasoning, like, I kind of understand that he was afraid that Brian was going to do something.
This thing that Eric moving the gun isn't what made me feel this was shady. It was just a subsequent thing. So now we've got someone else's fingerprints on this gun. It's already got Brian's because it's his duty weapon. He touches it every day. Now it's apparently got Amy's fingers on it.
Yeah.
And now we've got Eric's hands on it. That's not great. So Brian has blood all over his hands. And of course, the first ones on scene when he calls 911 is his police department, his coworkers.
Mm-hmm.
Mike McCabe, who at the time, was he the chief at the time? No,
I don't believe he was the chief at the time. No, he's the mayor now.
Sorry, he's the mayor now. I'm reading this incorrectly. He's the mayor now. He was on the force. He was the senior captain of the Westfield Police Department's detective force. So Brian's boss, basically.
Yeah.
He arrives on scene. What does he find? He finds his coworker crying upset. His wife is dead. Brian gets up. He's talking to him, and he says, "Can I go wash my hands?" And McCabe said, "Sure." He went and he washed his hands. What does that do? Residue gone. Like, there's no testing that you're able to do on his hands now. And Mary Sandstrom, the assistant district attorney, says in one of the articles, "Were you aware," she says this to McCabe at court, "were you aware that Brian Fanion washed his hands before state police arrived to examine his hands?" He says yes, without elaboration. That is just such a big red flag to me because let's not forget, Brian's a detective.
Yeah.
He works cases like this. He knows.
Yeah.
So he knew what he was asking.
Mm-hmm.
And he got away with it because it's his coworker. He knows him. You have blood on your hands.
And
oh my gosh, you're traumatized.
This is exactly why the state police conducted the investigation.
Yes, for moments like that, because there could have been, and I'm sure these are all extremely competent people, and they would have done their job to the best of their abilities, but
at the end
they're
of the
his
day,
coworkers, and they have a bias to him.
But this is also somebody in all the testimony that everybody has said glowing things about.
Yes.
And I'm speaking to McCabe's testimony. There's a line that Cliff had taken down, and so this is before the affair had come out to people, and McCabe says that Brian Fanion was God's gift to mankind prior to the affair. And then Cliff ends his article with Sandstrom asking, was that before or after the affair? And he said that was before. Yeah. So there's a lot of reputation stuff.
Yeah, a lot of this really does seem to, it really seems to come back to an image and the reputation of these folks and whether or not people really knew them. And I'm saying that for Brian and Amy, because a lot of people seem to be like, Amy was this, she was that, she was so wonderful, blah, blah, blah. But then we've got her family being like, well, she had a really bad temper. There was this going on that people didn't seem to really know about. And it's the same. Like McCabe says here, he's talking about, we had so many common interests. He was a terrific police officer, saying all of this about Fanion. And, they ask him, McCabe, if he knew of any tension in their marriage. And he said, well, like back in 2004, Fanion offhand mentioned to me when we were at a conference that she had a little temper, but, no notion of this to the degree that it allegedly was.
Yeah, I guess going off of that, I just find it fascinating that the family testified about this temper so much, where I believe it was her daughter or her son said that when they would go on road trips, mom was always the navigator. And Brian was always the one driving. And one of the issues was if he would miss like a turn or something, the sister said the daughter in the testimony said that she would like freak out that they had missed a single turn. And it's just interesting when you don't see that from some of the other people that testified.
But does that all, like we've talked about a temper, but a temper does not equate to suicide.
It doesn't mean.
Right. A temper, getting angry fast, getting whatever, doesn't mean that they want to hurt themselves.
No.
Like two totally different things. And in my opinion, that's not an opinion that has any sort of, I don't have any healthcare background or any real mental health understanding, but I don't see, we haven't created a strong enough correlation there for me to really think that is a direct tie. Getting angry and committing suicide are two different things.
And one thing that we have to mention that wasn't mentioned is there was no, as far as I know, there was no real history of depression with Amy, which is a big one. Right. Obviously, anxiety is a mental health issue, but it's not to the level that, or I don't want to say to the level, but it's not the same as depression is. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Before we wrap up this discussion with one more final point, we're going to take a quick break.
Bring It Home magazine takes the best in the home renovation or home building business to your door. Featuring countless local businesses, Bring It Home helps Western Massachusetts and Connecticut homeowners, both new and seasoned, find the best of the best to suit their home's needs. The magazine is host to articles on local businesses explaining the latest trends, from outdoor necessities to indoor design. For advertising information or to view Bring It Home online, go to thereminder.com.
Are you planning your second act? Working on your bucket list? Investing for early retirement? If you've hit that point in life where time will soon be yours, let Prime Magazine be your guide. We're all about staying healthy and fit, keeping up with tech, traveling, local entertainment, managing finances, caring for your kids and elders, and much more. Pick up the latest copy of Prime Magazine every month. Prime, your best life now.
And we're back. So we're going to wrap up this, but he said one more point, and I really have two more points that I want to make here. First, we need to talk about the things that Brian was searching before Amy's passing. So Sandstrom shared that before Amy's death, Brian had performed computer searches on how divorces affect a pension, gunshot residue collection, and how to delete text messages permanently from his cell phone. Sandstrom says, he's preparing himself for an investigation. Sandstrom also said that he appeared to be an upstanding member of the Westfield community, but said because of his visibility in the community, divorce was out of the question. So that ties back into what we were saying earlier. But he had these searches, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. He was worried about them. He confided in his sister-in-law saying, hey, I looked up these things and I'm nervous that they're going to think this.
And now,
well, yeah, of course.
Not only the sister-in-law, but also to former Westfield chief John Camerota. He confirmed in like the hours after the shooting that, or however it was, the shooting or the suicide, that Brian had spent hours like researching gunshot residue and like how it would like show up on your skin and stuff like that.
How would that ever be if your wife just committed suicide in front of you? Mm-hmm. How is that something you are thinking about? If you didn't do it, you're not looking at that.
No.
You're not concerned.
Like, if my wife died right in front of me like that, the last thing I'm going to do is search how to get gunshot residue off of me. That's
right. If you're not guilty, then everything should be in your favor. You should be good to go. But he knew. He knew there. Yeah. My feelings have been felt. Everybody knows how I feel. I don't know. But, I feel bad because obviously I can't sit here and say 100%. But why would you make those searches? There were multiple things here, multiple little things that all add up to me feeling very uneasy and being
not just on personal devices either. He was doing this at the department as well.
And in the special said that too. He had searched these things. He didn't have any cases like this going on that he was looking into. There was no murder case in Westfield in 2018 that he was looking into and working on in that moment. So it was all a connection to this? And I think that's the biggest. I mean, there's a ton of little red flags for me, but that's a big one for me.
Yeah.
His searches. Why would you be looking up gunshot residue collection?
And speaking of the searches, one of them was weird to me. I was going through Cliff's articles, and one of them popped out that he had looked up a murder from 2008 on Murderpedia. I guess that's... I'm not...
Murderpedia?
Yeah.
So alarming.
I know.
I almost want to look it up just so that I have an understanding of what Murderpedia is, but I'm worried my company laptop will be revoked.
I don't think that's a company-approved website.
You think I'll get in trouble
to.
on that? Oh, I'll wait till I go home. I'll use my phone. But then, I don't want to be
you have to,
I've got some bad search.
We shouldn't be
I shouldn't be making
about
a joke about that. That's so terrible. But I have never heard of Murderpedia.
Yeah. And
so was that a similar circumstance? Is that what he was looking it up?
The article I was reading did not say, but like we just said, I was not going to go looking up Murderpedia.
On the work-issued laptop,
All that Cliff had wrote was that it was a 2008 death in Maine.
It's very strange. I'm going to have to ask him about that after we get off this podcast, because now I'm curious, and unfortunately we're leaving people with curiosity.
Yeah.
But I do have to give Cliff a massive shout out for his reporting.
Mm-hmm.
Cliff had just come to us the week prior. I think we hired him on a Thursday or a Friday.
Yep.
I think it was a Thursday. And the trial started Monday. And we said, guess what? Your first 5 weeks are going to be in court. What a lovely new office experience he had. He was never in it. He was just in court every day, and he did an amazing job. And really, he was a veteran reporter before he came to us. He's been a publisher. He's done a lot in this industry. And we're very lucky to have him. But his reporting just truly shone in this trial. He did an amazing job.
Yeah.
So...
before we move on, I just...
3 points. We're at 3 points now.
Well, it's not an extra point. It's speaking of Cliff's work, but I just... Some of the way he wrote these articles was just, I feel like, profound in some ways. Like the way he would end it. Like the quote that I had discussed about McCabe saying that he was God's gift to mankind prior to the affair and stuff like that. Just the way he would wrap these things up, I don't know.
His writing is stellar.
Yeah.
Great writing skills. Absolutely. I agree. He did an amazing job. I don't even know how we really end this, because it's a lot of open-ended things. I mean, Brian was sentenced. He was found guilty. And now it's what? It's being
appealed right now.
It's being appealed right now. They're always appealed. So there's that hanging in the balance, and maybe we will hear more, maybe we won't.
Yeah.
The decision might remain the same, but I think that there's a lot of information here. There's a lot that could really go either way.
Yeah.
I do think it's a huge thing in Brian's favor that all of the family is on his side.
And they were attesting to all these different issues that...
Absolutely. But I do think also there are so many things that don't add up here. And I think the jury, in my opinion, came to the right decision.
I didn't mention it sooner, but I wanted to bring it up. It was because in the special they had showed when the detectives had first started speaking to him, I think it was they had brought him back after some investigating, and they had come back and they were asking him all these questions, kind of beating around the bush. Did you do this? Did you not do this? And then it was almost like insert your favorite crime show here, like NCIS, CSI, whatever. And the way they like beat around, and then he was like, "Are you accusing me of this?" And then they go, "We might have some evidence that would kind of cast doubt on the suicide angle of this." And the look you see in his eyes, they just get so wide. I don't know. I mean, obviously, being accused of murder is a pretty shocking thing, but I did see that expression, and he seemed, I don't know if I'd say surprised, because he was searching gunshot residue right after this. He obviously knew that there was potentially going to be some links here. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't know how to end this. Yeah.
I think it's a great special. People should watch it if they're interested, especially Western Mass locals, since it's a local story. If anyone's interested in reading the articles, if you missed them, you can find them on Mass Live.
Yep.
And you can use the search tool and just search for Brian Fanion, and all the articles will come up.
Yeah, a quick search will give you a whole list of
Treasure
articles
trove
that
of
is
articles, yeah.
almost never ending.
Like 30. So you got some reading material to do, but it really is, if you're into this kind of thing, it's very interesting, and Cliff really did a fantastic job.
Absolutely.
So that wraps up this episode of So That Reminds Me.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks with our next episode.
Thanks for listening to So That Reminds Me, produced by Western Massachusetts news source Reminder Publishing. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, find the latest news at thereminder.com, and follow Reminder Publishing on Instagram at Reminder Publishing, on X at The Reminder MA, and on Facebook. Reminder Publishing, we are hometown news.